Hey everybody, Javier here. Once again, bringing you another fantastic episode of Javier in the Air. This episode today has to do with music and beer. So, great, both of them great topics to talk about. I can talk about both of them all day long. Unfortunately, I'm going to try to keep this under 40 minutes, so we have about a little less than 40 minutes to talk about music and beer. As always, there is the beer component, and we'll talk a little bit about beer. I'll have a couple of reviews on there. And then the music, which comes first, I will be talking to a friend of mine and his influences and the art of karaoke. So let's get right into it. So, as far as the talk about music, everybody has an influence. Everybody is influenced or inspired by different types of music. I myself really got into the music back in the 80s with the onset of MTV. Yes, I'm dating myself there, but if anybody can remember, and I'm sure a lot of people do, if you can remember the opening, the beginning of what really expanded music for in my opinion, around the world, around the U.S. So you had your local bands, and you had some music, and at the time you had to wait for a lot of music to come out, and so there was just there was vinyl and record players, and there were still some 8 tracks around that time. I remember the first or the only 8 track that I can remember had to do with ELO, and so it was a great 8 track tape. But mostly albums growing up, and then moved into cassettes. And so everybody has their influence from music on what they listen to, what they like to listen to. And so with MTV came the ability for people to expand what they already knew. So, for example, there was music that my brother and sisters and I listened to, and we knew about, and we would listen to it, and maybe we'd have one or two other people tell us, "Hey, have you heard of this band? Check them out." But otherwise, it was the big bands, it was the super groups, it was those kind of individuals, those kind of groups that were out there that were marketed. They were the ones that were played mostly on the air, and because of that, those were the ones we knew. Those were the ones we listened to. Those are the ones that got us through the day. However, there is plenty of music out there that wasn't just local, and it was starting to grow. Probably, I'm sure in the 60s and 70s, people can tell me it started to grow, but really the 80s is where it was at as far as the growth of music, that people found. So with MTV, we started listening to music that we would have never heard of, never listened to on the air, on TV. We would have never listened to them. We would have never bought the albums because we probably would have never heard of them. What was the first song that came out on MTV? The Buggles. Video Killed the Radio Star. Now, is that a group that a lot of people listen to? No, but they do. They will continue to listen to it because it reminds them of the first song on MTV, and it reminds them of MTV. And music is definitely a huge part of everybody's lives. There's a song that can take you back to your first date, your first love, your first marriage, or your only marriage, depending on how it goes. Your first time that you drank a beer, the first time that you went to a bar, the first time that you danced with your crush, the first time that you cried over somebody, the first time that someone introduced you to a band that became the band that you would listen to for the rest of your life. And everybody has some. And I will be talking more about music on various other podcasts throughout, hopefully, my career here of doing Javier in the Air. And it's it should be taking a lot of time to do it. This one episode is not going to do it justice. We're going to hit a very small slice of what is a very large topic. It's the same way that we're doing with beer. So I'd like to hear from you guys if you have other ideas for music that you would like to hear and talk about on my show. I definitely if you're interested in being interviewed for music, your music influences, perhaps you're an accomplished um, musician. Perhaps you've been in, you've done some gigs when you were young, and you like to talk about it. Perhaps there's a record that you want to bring out and talk about. Or if you just even don't have to be an expert, if you just want to simply talk about some of the music. I had a great conversation the other day with some neighbors of mine while we were playing dominoes, and we enjoyed probably for about a half hour talking about what made us reminisce, and the influence of music in our lives. And we talked about super groups, and Zyda talked about Carole King, and we talked about heavy metal stuff. So what influenced you? I'd like to hear back in the thread of the podcast. Hey Javier, what about this group? Or this was my favorite group of all time. Or I liked them for this reason. I believe James talked about Jethro Tull, which the Mad Piper. So that's a great band, and that was a interesting individual that I didn't come across until I was probably in my early teens. Only because, again, uh, where would you find them? Where would you listen to? I mean, in San Antonio, you had the 99.5 Kiss, which got huge in the 80s because they were the heavy metal um, radio that you would listen to, that my brother would listen to, and my sisters would probably listen to. And then late Sunday nights, they had the King Biscuit Flower Hour, and that was all about the music that was going on in the heavy metal. And San Antonio, for those who may not have known, was considered the heavy metal capital of the world at one point. There was years where heavy metal bands were told, "Look, if you don't go to San Antonio, you're never gonna make it in the heavy metal biz." And so a lot of bands started out in San Antonio. A lot of bands would move their way through San Antonio, um, and so it was really interesting to see. And a lot of music went through that city, and it was a great city to live at during that time, um, especially during the 80s. One of the first concerts I remember going to is Aha and Tears for Fears. So if anybody remembers those bands, not necessarily one-hit wonders, but they're pretty close. And that was, again, music that was influenced to me from the 80s. And 1984 was the year that I really discovered Prince. Purple Rain. That was that was my 84, 85. I listened to that continually, and it was great. So what song or what album or what music do you listen to day in, day out? A friend of mine at one point, Allison Ball, once told me that every day you should listen to one song when you get up in the morning. Just one. I mean, listen to a lot of music, true, but one song that you listen to in the morning that really gets you going. Um, and for me, which is kind of weird, it was "Everybody Wants to Rule the World" by Tears for Fears. I would listen to that every morning to make my day start off really good. Now, if you break down that song, you realize it's not the happiest of songs, and it actually means something totally different. But the music is what was important to me. So they say when you're happy, you listen to the music and the tonal and the quality to it. When you're sad, you listen to the words. So there may be a different component when you're happy as to when you're sad. So think about that, and see how many songs you listen to that you like because of just simply the tones and the music that's going through there, and the chords they're doing, and the different beat and that sort of thing. And then think about the songs that you like to listen to when you're sad. Again, there's a reason why the Smiths did so well for their albums. If you listen to their music, it's really good music, and some of it is really up and peppy and happy. But then you listen to the words, and those words will start taking you down, and will mean something totally different. So if you think about some of the songs that you've liked and loved over the years, think about what you're doing. Are you listening to the music, or are you listening to the words? Now, of course, you will have a mesh of both going together, that it's happy and happy words, or it's sad and it's sad words. But I think you'll find that you listen to that song at different points in your life, and you listen to different parts of it. So that's really the music thing that did it. So again, going back again, I'm sorry I got off again. The good thing about MTV was that my brother and I, and my sisters too, it really expanded our music vocabulary, or you can say our music archives, or just a music understanding of the world around us by a lot of the songs that came out. And the 80s was just prolific. And what made it really prolific compared to a lot of the ways it is now is that because you got to see the band as well. So sometimes you would listen to a song and be like, that's a pretty good song. And then you see the group and you're like, wow. I just don't even wow. I think a big wow for me was Wendio and the Plasmatics. So if you know that group or you know how they look, then you know what I'm talking about. Devo, for example. Devo probably wouldn't have been as big as they got if we never saw them on TV. They had good music and it was great music, but it was the characters themselves of Devo that really took you out into into the beyond. There was a lot of bands like that. There was Besides, there was the B-52s. Even though that they dressed normally, they were a little out there with some of their things, which but the videos are really what did it. Haircut 100, Blondie. Like people knew of Blondie, of course, in New York and everything like that. But when you see it and when you're coming from Texas, it blew your mind as to how she looked and the things that they did. And then a lot of it was videos as well. I know bands like Duran Duran and the Police and Tom Petty. Even though they were big names, they their videos really brought it home for a lot of people. I know personally of people that told me that they listened to a band and they were okay with them, and then they watched their videos and they were like, "Holy cow, this band is great! I love the videos. It's fantastic." Dire Straits been around forever. They're great music, but some of their videos were just fantastic with the animation that they brought in and all that. The Aha one, of course. There's just on and on and on and on. Like I said, I can go forever on this. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stop here because it's really not just about me. I interview a good buddy of mine, Chris McDowell. I used to work with him, and it turns out we both have I want to say passion because I thought I used to have a passion for meatloaf until I met this guy. Now, meeting Chris, he truly has a passion for meatloaf. So we're gonna listen to my interview with Chris about meatloaf and karaoke and his dive into that. He's a San Antonio boy. San Antonio. I'm always gonna root for the people that come out of San Antonio. That's just who I am. Um, he'll talk a little bit about radio, a little bit about this and that, and then also I put a couple of questions to him that really got him thinking. I think, and so we'll see if it gets you thinking too. So let's go to interview Jav and see how that goes. So listen to Chris and Javier as they talk about music. All right, here we go. All right, everybody. Thanks for coming to the podcast. The section that we're talking about today is music. And I have my buddy Chris McDowell with me here, a fellow San Antonian. So we're here, definitely. We're here to talk about music. And so, Chris, if you want to give a little breakdown about like where you're coming from as far as the music influences that you've done, and then we'll talk about some other things after that. So just give us a little background about what music is for you, and your influences and stuff like that.
Music. I don't think I'm unique in this, but music is an escape. Music is a way for me to get back inside myself and contemplate and reflect and think, and kind of leave the world behind. Growing up in San Antonio, like you, rock and roll was a big part of the music scene down there. So
Yeah.
many bands, people don't know, so many bands on the rock scene in the early 80s got their start or their first real exposure in the US in San Antonio. Um,
Yeah.
Ozzy Osbourne, when he went solo, a lot of his stuff first showed up on 99.5 Kiss. Rush got their first major airplay in San Antonio. Um, in fact, I think it was Ozzy who one time he called San Antonio in the mid '80s. He called it the black T-shirt capital of the world.
True, true.
Yeah, rock and roll concert T-shirts were just there everywhere. So growing up, lots of rock and roll. Listen to the radio. 99.5 Kiss had a top 10 countdown every night. You know, the top 10 most requested songs. I remember "I Love Rock and Roll" by Joan Jett was on top of that list for it seemed like a couple years.
Yeah.
It's probably just a few months, but it seemed like it was forever. So yeah, that kind of molded me as far as my musical tastes. Then in middle school, I was at a dance, and the DJ there was from the rock station 99.5 Kiss, and one of the door prizes he gave away that I ended up winning was a 33 LP single of Metallica's "Fade to Black."
Wow.
Yeah, just the single, but it was on a 33 record.
Yeah,
I remember it was green vinyl and glowed in the dark. And I'd never listened to Metallica because Metallica at that time, they were still kind of hardcore. They weren't getting a lot of radio airplay, even in San Antonio.
Right.
But listening to that record, I was like, whoa, I've never heard anything like this before. I want more. So that led me on Metallica for several years. And I kind of stuck. Metallica was my favorite artist for many years, more than a decade, until you see these posters behind me. His Holiness Mr. Loaf.
Give us a breakdown on that when you have a chance.
Yeah, His Holiness Mr. Loaf, Meatloaf, has become my all-time favorite singer, and that also came from listening to the radio. It was 1993, and Bat Out of Hell 2 had just come out. I'd Do Anything for Love, which was all over the radio at the time. It was just like with Metallica. It was something I've never heard anything like this before, even though it's a totally different kind of music. It was something new. And it grabbed my attention. And I actually remember calling the DJ that night saying, "That song you just played, who is that?" He said, "Oh, it's Meatloaf." And I'd heard the name Meatloaf before. I knew he was a singer, but I'd never listened to him. He said, "Yeah, it's on his new album, Bat Out of Hell 2." And I said, "Well, part 2, is there a part 1? And so actually my first exposure to Meatloaf was Bat Out of Hell 2. And then I loved it so much I went and found the first Bat Out of Hell. And at that point, it was over. Ever since then, I have everything he's ever done, including some unreleased stuff. And by far my favorite singer.
So I know we see a lot of the posters, but the one that we talked about offline was the middle one. Explain that middle one to us. The what did you say, Danish?
Yeah, the yellow one. That's the album cover of Hang Cool Teddy Bear, which is 3 albums ago. That came out in 2012, I want to say.
Okay.
I really ought to know that for sure, but I want to say 2012. But yeah, and that's why it says "Ude Nu." That means out now in Danish, and that's a poster from a Danish record store.
That's not like the name. That's not like the name of the album, right? That they're just saying this album is out.
Yeah, this album is out now. Yeah, the title of the album is "Hang Cool Teddy Bear."
Cool.
And I'm biased, but I think it's a very good album.
That's great. So all right, so we talked about a little bit about influences. We definitely talked about 99.5 Kiss, which is I think was just a bedrock to mini rock music back in the day. I know there is also that King Biscuit Flower Hour that used to come on Sunday nights on Kiss, and that was awesome too. But moving forward, let's talk a little bit about, because I know you're into this. Let's talk a little bit about karaoke and like where you got into that, and what you think about all that.
It's funny. I'm a fairly shy guy. I mean, I can talk to you because we've known each other a long time now, and a few years. But I'm very much an introvert, and there was a time where you could not have gotten me up in front of a crowd to sing, with a gun to my head. It wasn't going to happen. The
Right.
thought of exposing myself like that was just unthinkable. And it wasn't because I didn't think I could sing. I knew I could sing. I grew up with a band and orchestra background, so I knew about being in tune and being in key, and I would hear myself if I was out of tune or out of key, and I could correct it. So I
Okay.
knew I could sing, but I just the thought of doing that in front of people was terrifying. But like so often happens with guys, how do we get talked into doing something we don't want to do? A
Woman.
girl, a girl asked us to do it, and
Nice.
this was probably '99 or 2000, and I was still telling everybody I knew about Meatloaf, whether they wanted to hear it or not. And this girl that I was really interested in also knew Meatloaf and liked him, and says, "Oh, you've got to sing, you've got to sing Paradise by the Dashboard Light with me. It's a duet, a man and a woman duet.
Right. Right.
You can't put one without the other." And I was stuck because I couldn't back down in front of her, and I wanted to impress her, and she liked the song. And finding a girl that likes Meatloaf is not all that common. At least it wasn't common in my experience. So I
No,
didn't want
not
to.
at all.
It's hard to let that go. So she drugged me up there, and I knew the song obviously, and I sang it, got a good reaction, and man, after that I was hooked. I couldn't get enough of it. I started turning up at the karaoke bar most nights. After about a year, I'd gotten really tight with the DJ, the host. They're actually called KJs, but nobody knows what a KJ is, so I just say DJ/host.
Right.
Got really tight with him. He actually ran karaoke shows at several bars around San Antonio, and was starting to need some help because he obviously can't host them all.
Right.
So he asked me if I wouldn't mind helping him out and actually taking over and running the shows for him a couple nights a week. Sure, I'll do that. And so started. Whoa, that's my camera there.
What? Oh, there you go.
Started running karaoke shows 3 or 4 nights a week at a bar downtown on the Riverwalk in San Antonio. So
Nice.
it became a job, and it was something that I started doing on a regular basis. Not just singing, but on the other end of it as well. Learned a whole lot. Learned about sound levels, how to run a soundboard, and make yourself sound good. Or if a singer is he leans toward one spectrum of the audio, you kind of dial that down and bring up the other side. And so learned a lot there. Learned a lot about dealing with people. There's always people that bugging you about, hey, what am I singing next? What am I singing next? And learn a little bit of crowd control. And it was a lot of fun. Learn how to read a room.
Oh, okay.
Because you're usually playing songs in between singers,
Sure.
especially if it's a slower night. And so you learn to read the room, like what kind of songs, what kind of music they want to hear. And the quick and easy way I figured out was try to estimate the average age of the crowd, and from that age calculate when they were in high school, and then go and find the Billboard Top 100 from those years. And
Nice.
I mean, you can't miss it. Can't miss. It works
You,
every time.
you can't go wrong with the 80s. That's all I got to say. That's all I got to say. You can't go
That's
wrong
it.
with the 80s.
That's it.
So a couple of quick questions before I let you go. So we talked earlier before I was recording, how I thought that maybe streaming or online karaoke might be something that people can do right now during this virus. But you had a good answer for that as to why not. And so why not? Why do you think that wouldn't really work?
Yeah, my initial reaction to that was, and just speaking for myself, but having been around it for so long, I think this is probably an accurate statement. When I go to sing karaoke, one of the ways I judge a venue that has karaoke, is I judge how good their sound system is.
Okay.
Do they have a soundboard? Do they have a guy who knows how to run it? So not only does the music sound good, but he helps the singer sound good. And so my first initial reaction to the idea of doing karaoke over Zoom or something like this is I would be concerned about the audio quality. Now, if you could convince me that the audio quality would be there, fine. Then that would take care of that. However, there's one other aspect of it, and again, just speaking for myself, for me, part of the enjoyment of going out and singing karaoke is the crowd and the audience and getting a reaction.
Right.
supporting your friends who are up there singing, giving them good reactions, but also even if it's a crowd of strangers out there and all of a sudden you kind of notice they're all looking at you and they like what you're doing and they're reacting to you and they're applauding you when you're done. And there's not many things that feel better than that. And so I don't know if you would get that same visceral crowd reaction that
Right.
you would
Yeah.
from actual people over a screen like this.
Well, like you said, you're talking about reading a room, so you can't really read a screen. You can see people's faces, but you just don't get that same vibe that you would coming off of like the room. You get that presence of that. Plus, you also feed off the crowd and start getting more into it. So yeah, I could see that. So we'll see if maybe I can find something online and I can post that in the rest of the podcast and see if I found anything. Okay, last question before I let you go. Top five, either group or musicians for you all time, top five across the board. I know you got a ton. I know you got a ton. So let's go. Let's go with five for now.
Now this is going to be weird because I have quite possibly the most varied musical taste of anyone you're ever going to meet.
Okay.
I get bored very easily with music. I change it up quite a bit. Um, in fact, usually back when we were in the office, I'd be playing music at my desk, and people would comment on how jarring the changes were from song to song.
I remember.
But easily, as I said before, my number one overall top favorite artist of all time is Meatloaf.
Yeah.
Metallica is right there. I'm into Metallica just as much. Just Meatloaf has more of the visceral, emotional reaction. After that, it gets kind of weird. I really love Neil Diamond.
Ooh.
Neil Diamond, just a fabulous songwriter.
Yeah.
And lots of emotional songs with a lot of heart and feeling behind them.
Gotcha.
Going in another direction, I really love Blue Man Group. Not just their theatrical productions, but just their music.
Yeah.
It's very kind of a tribal rock kind of thing.
Gotcha.
And then rounding out the top five is actually going to be something from the classical world, and that would be the music of Beethoven. Beethoven was the heavy metal of his time. The music he was making at the time was very counter to a lot of the more formal, stuck-up chamber music kind of things at the time. Beethoven was very visceral and emotional, and people, critics and especially the religious, the clergy at the time, condemned it for being too emotional and brought out passions that weren't supposed to be there. And it sounds very much like the same criticisms you'd see during the 80s when Dee Snider of Twisted Sisters up in front of Congress defending his music because people are telling him that he's talking about devil worship and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's funny how the tune changes but the song stays the same over the years. So.
That's right. That's great. Well, excellent. Well, hey, it was good talking to you, Chris. I'll probably have you on later on in the year because I want to dive more into the music and influences that you know about. Plus, we can talk about San Antonio and music all day. I mean, all day long. So I'll bring you back and we'll have a different attack on music and that sort of thing. So thanks for letting me interview you, and we'll be talking to you again soon. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Later.
Hey, so great interview there with myself and Chris. You got to hear a lot of the background, a lot about Meatloaf, a lot about karaoke, and a lot of influences and inspirations that Chris had. So again, by no means are we even close to barely scratching the surface about music and how it touches people's lives. And I'll have more podcasts as the seasons go along, and we'll talk more about influences and stuff like that. So now we're gonna go switch to the other portion, which I know some people are like, well, this is the time that I turn it off, but hopefully you won't. For those of you that are interested, I'm gonna have two quick beer reviews that I'm gonna throw in there, and then we'll wrap this up because I know this has gone on a little bit longer because of the music portion, but which I think is fantastic. So I'm gonna have the latest review, my 102nd beer review. For those of you who are just catching on to my broadcast, during the day or the 2 days before the first lockdown that we had in Austin, Cedar Park, Texas area, back on March 25th, I want to say, maybe the 24th, I started doing a beer review. And I did one beer a day, a different beer every day for 100 days. I finished up on the 4th of July as my 100th beer. And then actually, it might have been Wednesday. Actually, Wednesday prior to the 4th, I finished up, and then I've been doing one now a week, adding to my video podcast. I still post them on on my Facebook page, but now I'm doing them incorporated inside of my Javier in the Air episode. So what I'm also doing is I'm throwing a throwback to those times in March, way years ago, back in the start of the COVID. Feels like it, doesn't it? I wanted to throw one back in there as well. So I'm going to be doing the new one, the 102nd review, which actually is from Austin Eastsiders. I love my shader, and I like to say shader because it's fun, and because I'm old enough now that I don't care what other people say. Hence, also why I also do the podcast. And so Austin Eastsiders, and then the latest review, or the oldest review, I should say. This one is called Evil Dankster. Not bad, pretty decent. You'll see how many thumbs up I gave it in the thing. So I'm gonna turn this over to Beer Review Hav. So Beer Review Hav, go ahead and take it away. Hey, thanks, Video Podcast Javier. You're doing a great job. Keep it up. And I noticed that the theme is music, and music to my ears is beer review time. This is Beer Review Javier. We're here doing my 102nd beer review for during these times. Thanks again for the boutique being still open for picking up your bottles and cans of beer and shaders and heading on out. So if you haven't been there before, please stop by. Talk to the team. They'll set you up with whatever you're looking for. And whether you're looking for something, straight off the line or something unusual, these guys have it. So go and check them out. All right, so for this 102nd review, I am reviewing Austin Eastsiders, and once again, I know I've done some Austin Eastsiders in the past, quite a few. I haven't done their whole line, but this is their Texas Honey, and so let's take a look and see what we got here. 5.0 ABV, by the way. There's a nice golden color you can see there as you get a nice view of my truck in the background. Coming on back, let's try it out. Oh, really good. Really good on the front end. Nice aroma, like you do with most shaders. You get a good aroma of that sugar and then anything else that you have in there. For this example, definitely the sugar you're getting from the honey. And it's a smooth in the front end. Nice crispness on the tongue. I think I still said that wrong. And nice finish. So it's a really good shader that you want to drink during on a hot day like it is today. It's brutal today, but a nice shader will do you well while you're listening to music, hanging out on your front porch or your back porch, or hanging out somewhere. Listen to some music, enjoy an Austin Eastsiders shader, and enjoy the rest of the day. So for the thumbs up, I still have not gone wrong with Austin Eastsiders, so I am going to give this one a 9. 9 thumbs up, by the way up. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm gonna pass it back to Video Podcast Javier, and I hope you had some good music to listen to today. As far as the beer goes, I'll be here doing the review. Thanks again. Hey everyone, Javier here again. This time I'm looking at the Evil Dankster IPA, brewed with sick amounts of distilled Azeka and El Dorado hop oils. I hope I'm saying Azeka right. You see it right there. This is from Tubbs Brewery, 7.0 ABV, 12 ounces. This came in a 6-pack again. Thank you, Boutique, for being there for me. And now we'll take a look at it. Here it is. Beautiful golden color. You see that color coming from the sun. Good taste to it. Nice finish. Smooth. I would give this one, I gotta try it again. If you like IPAs, I believe this is it. I'd give this one probably a 8.5 out of 10. Thanks. Hey, thanks, Beer Review Hob. What a great review. Great reviews, actually. New, which a little bit more polished. Still not that polished, but a little bit more polished. And then old from about almost 4 months ago now. So you can really see the difference, at least I can. So those were the beers that I wanted to highlight today. If you have a chance and you live in the Austin Cedar Park area, I totally recommend going to the Boutique and seeing my friends out there and asking them for either Evil Dankster or some of the shaders that are out there. And by the way, there's not just Austin Eastsiders has a ton of ciders. By the way, of course, obviously it's in the name, and they are great. However, they're not the only game in town. They're not the only game in the country. There are a ton of other companies that do shiders. Company that I'm very familiar with and it's near and dear to my heart is Ola Brew. Ola Brew is out of Hawaii and they do some fantastic shiders as well. And they're beginning to grow a presence here in the continental United States. So they started out small in Hawaii and they've been growing. They use locally grown fruits that they throw into their shiders. And now I believe they're also doing hard seltzers. And well, I'm going to start saying seltzers because I like the way that sounds. Definitely, if you're in the California region, I know my cousin Gigi and her husband David were going to be checking to see if they can find it because it's now out at, I believe, at the Whole Foods. Their hard seltzers are out there. So seltzers and shiders go hand in hand. So if you have a chance, go out there. If you're in California, go out there and check out. If not, go online and check out Ola Brew. They have a great thing going there, and if and when, not if, but when we eventually get back to our normalcy of being able to travel, then I highly recommend you go out to Hawaii and check out Ola Brew. That's OLA, and you can find them online. Just search for them on Google. Okay, so I think that's gonna be it for today. I'm trying to keep it under 40 minutes and not go too long. Please let me know your thoughts and your feelings and your feedback and what you thought about the interview today, what you thought about the reviews. If there's anything you'd like to see me do differently, I've been trying to incorporate different things. I've been getting feedback from different individuals, and thank you all for that. And keep doing that. I appreciate it. The more polished I get, the more episodes I do. The more episodes I do, hopefully, the more people will watch, and the more people will watch, I can go off, and then I can just do this full time and be one of those great social media influencers. Anyway, definitely try it out and give me the feedback that you want. I'll take it all, good or bad. I take it all with a grain of salt, though not too much salt anymore these days, if you know what I mean. I'll do what I can. I'm still looking for more people to interview. I have at least 3 more guests lined up for the next couple of podcasts, and we will have different themes. We always have beer in the back end. The front end, we're going to be talking about whatever. Is it more music eventually? Yes. Is it about gardening? Is it about baking? Is it about mathematics? Is it about statistics? Is it about aerospace? Is it about what you do? Well, let me know. Shoot me a message and tell me that, hey, Javier, I am passionate about this and I'd like to be interviewed for about this. And I will certainly do that. So until next time, I hope everybody has a good rest of the week. Or if you're starting on Monday, depending on how you call the week. I hope everybody is staying safe, wearing your masks wherever you're supposed to, and just keep grooving along. And once again, we'll see you next week. Take care, everybody.